This episode is brought to you by Trello, which is trusted by millions of brave souls around the world to help them keep track of all their projects and to-dos. Trello is the easy, free, flexible, and visual way to manage your projects and organize anything. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. This is the place where we expose the threads of heroism that stitch together the stories we admire most. As a musician, singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and business owner, I encounter some really fascinating stories. Every episode you'll hear features a revealing conversation with someone who courageously pours themselves out into the world. We'll talk about fears befriended, the terrors battled, and the courage created along our stories of bravery, quiet heroism, and all-out gutsiness. We open the Pandora's box of the dream-crushing constraints we all face during significant moments of bravery. These moments of bare naked bravery are rarely censored in real life, so if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. The questions I ask today aren't scripted because I'm just curious. What is bravery? My hope for us all is that by listening to others search for and find their bravery, we will find our own. For that is what we need most, to know that we are not alone. The best way you can support the show is to share it with a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle's Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Bottom line, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Today, we get to talk with Theresa Reed. She is such a badass. I am so grateful that we got to talk with her today about what it means when everyone around you is second-guessing you and scoffing and not believing anything you say or doubting that you're going to be successful, and how we can softly educate and openly educate when everyone around us has a lack of understanding of where we're going and what we want to be doing. It's really tricky to deal with that. You don't want to cut off all of your friends and family just because you're the weirdo, because we need people, we need to be connected. But at the same time, sometimes the worst thing would happen if we didn't do what we want to do. And she and I talk about the two questions that you can ask yourself when you are battling this kind of environment around you from your lack of support, basically. We also talk a little bit about parenting and what it means to listen to your gut and how to be present. Let's jump right on into it. Are you ready for some bare naked bravery?
I'm so ready for it.
Yes. Okay, Theresa, you are here because you seemed like a wonderful, not victim, but a wonderful person to talk about this subject. I am so curious about how you have a career, and you do this often, but you have a career that people scoff at a lot. Mm-hmm. And when we talked a little bit previously, you seemed so gung-ho to talk about this subject. So I'm stoked that you're here. What do you do?
I work as a professional tarot reader, and I've been doing this now for 25 years, a little over 25 years. I also teach yoga on the side. That's my little labor of love. But my main bread and butter is doing tarot readings.
So tarot cards. And what kind of scoffing do you receive from the outside world?
Well, actually, you get quite a bit of flack if you're going to enter this as a career. First of all, there are people who are skeptical and they think it's bogus. There are people also who think that somehow if you're doing this, that you are scamming people in some way. So you get a lot of that. You get people who think that it is somehow unholy and that you're doing something that is the devil's work. So you get that. You get people also who just, don't understand it and they're scared of it. Maybe they've heard something negative, so they're afraid of you and they think you're spooky. And then you also get flack from your peers if you have the audacity to make a living doing it. So it's like you kind of get it from all different ends. So you have to go into this really aware that if you decide that this is going to be your work, you're going to take some flack for it.
How did this all start for you? I mean, this is 25 years. You've been doing it a long time, but how did this all start rolling?
Well, the tarot portion of my life started when I was a teenager. And, like most teenagers, what are we doing? We're trying to figure out who we are. And I had a girlfriend, she's still my best friend to this day, who had a really unusual mother. And her mother was a therapist, she was a pianist, she was a chain smoker, and she was also an astrologer. And she said, "Oh, let me do your astrology chart." And I said, "Well, sure." And I heard vaguely things in the newspaper about that. And so she did my chart, and it really made sense to me. I'm like, wow, this is giving me some answers here. And so I started studying astrology, and I laugh because I still have her astrology books. She passed on many years ago, but I inherited those books. But that's what I started with. And back in the day, this is 35 years ago, a long time ago, there were not a lot of books available or any major sections in the stores. And there was a bookstore that we would go to once in a while at the mall, and it was called Walden Books. I don't think they exist any longer. And I was in there looking for astrology books because I really wanted to, enhance what I was picking up from the books I borrowed from her. And I saw a tarot deck. And I looked at that deck and I thought, oh, I've seen you in the movies. So, of course, I was like, boink, I took that thing home on an impulse. And they came with a little white book, much as they still to this day. And I sat down with my sister and we began playing around with them. And I just kind of picked up on it pretty quickly. And this deck at the time that I got, there wasn't many available. Nowadays, you have so many other options, but it was the Marseilles deck, which is a really tough deck to start with. So I went into Walden Books again.
And for somebody who doesn't know much about it at all, why is it tough to start with? And
it's tough because the pips are not illustrated. So what you get are like a picture of 5 swords, 6 swords, 7 swords. Whereas with the Rider-Waite deck, which is the deck I'm going to talk about in a second, has everything illustrated. So for when you're just beginning with the Marseilles, you don't have a lot of imagery to work with. You have to work with, here is the formula. Now, I'm an intuitive person. Formula, I like to a certain degree, but I tend to go really with my gut. And so the next deck I picked up was the Rider-Waite deck. And when I picked that deck up, I already had some structure from the Marseilles deck, but the images spoke to me. And that's the difference with the Rider-Waite deck. The images, every pip card, everything's illustrated with an image from life. And in all of those 78 cards, they illustrate different aspects of our spiritual life, our material life, our romantic life, our feelings, our connection to the divine. It's all illustrated in those cards. And so I picked up on it really quickly, started reading for anybody who would let me, which I was in a rural area. Not many people would let you read it. They thought, what the heck is this? I was weird enough as it is. And all of a sudden you start bringing tarot cards into it. They're like, whoa. But I read whenever I could with whoever would, allow it. And then after doing that for about 10 years, it became a career, I always like to say by accident, much as like me discovering that deck. I was trying to figure out who I was again, this time as an adult. What do I do with my life? I had a great job. I quit. I moved back home because my father was ill. And I thought, well, I got to figure out what the heck I'm going to do. So I decided to get what I call a mindless job, bartending, which isn't not a mindless job. It's actually a hard job. And, I was put on the most boring shifts. So I started bringing in my tarot cards to have something to do. Now, people there with a couple of drinks in them, they were ready to let me read for them. So needless to say, my boring days became jam-packed. They became super popular because the word spread. And I even left and went to a different bar, and those people followed me. I had more new people. I was making very good money reading those cards behind the bar, and people there, I'd still get my flack, don't get me wrong. But again, you got a couple of drinks and people, they're a little more receptive. But people wanted more. They wanted more details because there's only so many cards you can flip down when you're also slinging drinks. And so what ended up happening is I started thinking seriously, maybe I should turn this into a career. And I told my boss, I think I might do that. And I just love this story because the boss then said, oh, what a great idea. And he went and told people that I would fail behind my back. And as soon as he said that, this is talk about being brave. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like a dare. So I quit my job, boom, done, and started my business. And my business took off, and it's been going for 25 years. And his business failed 2 years after that.
Isn't it amazing how sometimes righteous indignation is the thing that like cuts the cord and is the fire under your ass to get things going?
Yeah, sometimes you need a gentle nudge, but sometimes you need a push. And when somebody makes me mad, that is going to be the thing oftentimes that propels me to take an action.
Yeah. How did you structure that when you first started? Was it just like somebody called you up and they gave you some cash and you set an appointment, or was it did you bumble around?
I bumbled. I like to say I started my business off so slack-jawed. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I had no clue about business. So once again, it takes a fair amount of cojones to just quit your job and then start, and you have zero business skills. I wasn't even 30 years old. So here I am, I'm in my 20s. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I know not the first thing about business, except for the business classes my father forced me to take in high school. So I just only understood some basics. There was no internet back then. God bless the internet. It's made it so easy for people to start a business. I had to go find information the hard way. Everything was hard. So my business was word of mouth. What ended up happening is people would hire me for parties. And then I would pass out business cards, and then that would lead to parties. And then I finally got a location in my home. And so people then were able to come there, and it was all word of mouth for many, many years. I never advertised. I never was online because there was no online. I never paid for an ad. I would occasionally read in bars or at a local occult shop for a while, which, by the way, that was not my forte at all. That felt really confining. The bar, actually, believe it or not, even though there were people drinking, I preferred that. So I just read wherever I could. And again, it was all word of mouth. And then when I got the internet, which, by the way, it took me a while to adjust to that because I hate to sound like an old fogey, but I'm like, oh my God, I don't need this. And my kids forced me to get a computer, and they said, you better learn how to use emails. You can't be like this. And I'm like, oh my God, no. So they kind of pushed me into doing that and put up the website, and I've been going now. A lot of my business comes still. My clients here are the local ones, are word of mouth, or people who've been with me from the beginning. But I find a lot of people now on the web.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And I find it really impressive that you started that, especially at such a young age, but not having a predecessor. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people, especially who are getting online these days or who are starting businesses online, they have other people to look to either mimic or pull ideas from, but you were just from scratch, all internally sourced. And I think that's really, really impressive. Let's go back to your boss a little bit, though. Mm-hmm. So what do you think is fueling someone who is scoffing behind your back?
Well, there's a lot of things that could be. In his case, he just couldn't understand how somebody could make a living doing tarot. To him, that was like weird. He thought it was like just something freaky. Also, he was really sexist. I'm going to be honest here. He would sometimes say things that were really raising an eyebrow. So this 2 strikes against me. 1, I'm a woman, and 2, oh my God, you're going to do something weird. So it was that mentality that made him look at what I was thinking of doing as some kind of a losing thing. Of course, for him, he's running a bar and a restaurant. That's a normal, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here. It's a normal career. It's normal. It's something people accept, so to speak. So doing what I'm doing, yeah, that was going to be weird. And I have to say, too, my parents were horrified when I started my career. Because like them, like this boss, they also were like, how can you make money doing that? That's weird. They were mortified. They didn't want to tell anybody, this is what my daughter's doing. So they would tell people if they'd ask, oh yeah, my daughter works for this corporation, which anybody who knows me knows the last thing I would ever do is working for a corporation, because the job I had before this, I worked for a bike messenger firm, and I also worked for an anarchist newspaper. So not corporate material at all. So it's kind of funny. I still laugh about that.
Do you think, because I have had this frequently with some of my marketing clients who are authors or even friends who are songwriters, and to some extent myself as well. I find that family is the nucleus that supports you but doesn't understand you at all. Yeah. And to some extent, like when you're asking them for help getting your business started, or, sharing a piece of art or launching a book or whatever, they want to like give you the thumbs up, but they actually don't want to help.
Well, my family was the type who didn't want to help and didn't want to give any type of encouragement. God rest my parents' souls. My parents were farm people. They were 8th grade educated farm people. So I come from a background that's extremely humble, and my family was all about, you have to work hard, you should get a job in a factory or become a secretary. Those were what really were solid jobs to people like that. They were like super salt to the earth, roll up your sleeves, hands in the dirt people. And, we were again out in a rural area, and here you've got this one weird kid who's interested in all these things that you don't understand. And even like the music I got into at a very young age, and now we're talking again back in the 70s, I got into, and I have to laugh how I got into this curiosity crap. I got into punk rock when the Sex Pistols first came out. And I still remember that. I remember the day it happened. My mother and I were sitting in the kitchen, and I was reading the newspaper, had an article in there about punk rock music. I said, Mom, what's punk rock? She said, I don't know what that is. And, at the time I was listening to like Sean Cassidy and a little David Bowie and some of the regular stuff. And I was 12 years old. And so I thought, well, I'm going to find out what the heck this punk rock is. And I was at the grocery store, and I picked up a magazine called Cream Magazine. Now, my parents should have stopped me. They should have looked into that magazine. I opened that magazine, and I was like, wow, these guys look cool. So, of course, I got into that. And I was into all this really avant-garde, weird music, because I would go into the grocery store every week with Mom, and I'd go get those rock and roll magazines. And I'd walk down to this little record store, and I'd make this guy order these records for me. They're records. Look at, I'm really dating myself.
No.
Yeah. And he would say to me, are you sure you want this? And I'd be like, yes, because all the stuff that I liked was stuff that wasn't carried on the shelves. Back then they had Heart, or Kansas was big, or the Rolling Stones. Right. And here I am saying, I want you to order the Buzzcocks, this stupid little teeny bopper. And so, of course, I also got flack in school about that, because they were, I wasn't listening to the normal stuff. I was listening to the weird stuff. So I had a lot of kids who really thought, wow, you're a freak. And I would even get threatened to get beaten up for it. So my poor parents, I think it's hilarious, had this weird kid, 3 normal kids, but then you got this little freak who's got a lot of bad ideas at 13. And I said, my whole goal is I am moving to New York as soon as I hit 18, and I'm going to date those musicians. That was all I had in mind. That and tarot. So that's all I thought about when I was a teenager. That, tarot, art, music. So again, my poor parents, I have to say, God bless them for even finding a way to cope with that, because it could not have been easy. Not at all.
Well, so it sounds like you have been scoffed at your whole life. And so,
yes.
Picking tarot as a career was not something out of the ordinary for you, or dealing with that kind of level of scoffing? And
No, there's one incident in my life that I think really helped me with that. And it's going to sound like a weird incident, but when I was 2, I broke my leg. So I was in the hospital in traction for 6 weeks because that's what you did back then, and you left your kid there. So my parents left me there. This is the 60s. Again, boy, everyone's going to know how old I am now. So here I am. It's in the 60s. I'm in traction. I'm 2 years old. I'm really precocious. And while I'm in the hospital, my mother's having my sister. And so when I came home from the hospital, all of a sudden, here it is. There's another baby. There's 4 kids now. And I found myself feeling like an alien and completely detached from my parents because they had to leave me at the hospital. So it created a disconnect. And that disconnect actually wasn't necessarily a bad thing because it made me extremely independent. Right from like at 2 years old, everything changed. And it's really funny when you look back at the pictures of me as a kid with the family, I'm always standing off to the side. And I didn't realize that till a couple of years ago. My sister and I were looking, it's like, how funny. So I always remember feeling this need to be an individual. And even in school, I hated anything that seemed like groupthink. I didn't fit in with the other kids. I, from early on, felt weird, felt different. I had my own opinions. I was very fond of my own opinions. And then, of course, when I got into the music I got into, that made me definitely an alien. And then tarot cards on top of it. Yeah, so I would probably say very early on, I got very cool with doing my own thing and being an individual and taking the lumps that comes with that. Because when you do not go to groupthink, when you are not dressing like everyone else or thinking like everyone else or doing what they're all doing, you're going to get a fair amount of shit. And not everybody's going to be able to handle that. You've got to be able to be really strong in your individuality to say, I don't care what they think. I'm doing my jam.
Putting together a podcast was a crazy idea I've had for a long while. One of the reasons I put it off so long was all the details, scheduling, to-dos, emailing, and editing processes required to publish a single podcast episode. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And Trello might be the single reason why you're listening to this podcast right now. It helped me set up a simple way to visualize the production process of every episode. And I'm a visual learner, so spreadsheets don't always do the trick with me. Trello will help you manage any project you've got going on: family grocery lists, working with your assistant, brainstorming ideas, collaborating on that film project, or researching that ant farm hobby. Trello is simple on the surface, but has everything you need to get stuff done. Post comments for instant feedback, upload files from your computer, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, add checklists, labels, due dates, and so much more. And the notifications make sure you always know when important stuff happens. It's free, and you can sign up by going to barenakedbravery.com/Trello. TRELLO.
Okay, if you had somebody sitting in front of you, I am not terrified of doing my own thing because I am. I'm just not. But I know of some people who are. So if we had somebody sitting next to us right now who was just terrified to do the thing that they knew that they really wanted to do, but that everyone else from all angles was going to question or have something negative to say about it or whatever, what would you tell them?
First of all, there's 2 questions to ask yourself. What is the worst thing that would happen if I did this? And then the more important question, what is the worst thing that would happen if I didn't do this? Because often if you don't go for your dream or your goal or your thing, whatever it is, that is far worse than doing it and getting the crap that comes with it. Because if you don't do the thing that you are called to do, that you feel in your heart or your soul, that's really like denying a whole part of yourself. So you have to be able to ask yourself, what happens if I don't do this? Now, I think about that question if I didn't go and do my career, right? And let's say I was still bartending. God forbid, I can't imagine doing that. It is so hard on the feet. But let's say that's what I was doing. I just can't imagine. I think part of me would feel like my soul died. So I would say these are the things you have to ask yourself. And then the other thing I would say is just do it. And I know that sounds so simple, but I'm kind of like the anti, what is her name? Nancy Reagan, who also, what did Nancy Reagan say? Just don't do it, or just say no. I'm like, just say yes. Do it, try it. There's so many things that I tried in my life, really crazy things too. And I look back at it now and I love, because I got good crazy stories from my children. But we sometimes talk and I think, I'm so glad I took these risks, some of them which weren't good, because I know now. I've learned things about myself. So just do it. Just try it. Just try it.
I think that the trying aspect, it makes it feel safe. It makes the choice to jump off the ledge feel a little bit safe, knowing that like, I'm just trying this.
Mm-hmm. It does. I'm just going to try this out.
I'm just going to try it out. We'll see how it goes. I'm just going to try it.
It's like anything in life, like even like dating, right? When you date, we go into it, and so many people come into it with expectations. But when you're out there in the dating field and you're just open and just trying it out and just checking it out and seeing what is this person all about? Are we going to groove? And you have that really beautiful open attitude. No matter what happens then, you're going to come away with it with a really good lesson or something to think about. When you go into anything with expectations, whether those are good expectations, like I'm going to get ripped on if I do this, or I'm going to fail, or I'm going to succeed, I just think it's really good to, like, sometimes, just the way I started my business, you just leap in, you don't know what the hell you're doing, and you just be open. And it's amazing what you discover there. So amazing. Ultimately, taking these risks and going for these things, it's all about being vulnerable and open. And for some of us, we're taught we should take all safe routes. And the safe route can be okay for some people, but boy, do we get crusty in those safe zones. We get crusty there. I want to get the crust off.
Yeah. Living with crust is really uncomfortable. It just in general.
I agree. The only good crust is on an artisan bread loaf. That's it.
That is a quote. I'm going to write that down. That's great. Okay, so how can you help educate your surrounding people to support you? So, as I mentioned before, you have people who are surrounding you, some of whom you don't even want them to support you. Like, for instance, your boss. Like, you could care less what he thinks about you, except you want to prove him wrong. But for your immediate family who don't understand what you're doing, how do you teach those people what you do? And this is applied to you specifically, but also then
for everybody,
for everybody else. How do you gently instruct people and not cut them off?
Well, first of all, you have to listen to their fears. You have to listen to it. And I mean, that is really important, because oftentimes it isn't the fear necessarily that people think you're going to embarrass them, even though that's part of, of course, what my parents were worried about. But there's also other underlying fears, like the fear of, what if my kid doesn't make it? What if they go do this really weird thing and they fail? So, you've got to really listen to their fears. And often their fears tend to be more about worry that somehow what you're doing might lend to harm. And once you know that it's coming from that place, even if it seems like it's coming from sometimes the meanest place ever, often with our parents or the people who love us the most, that's really what it comes down to. They don't want to see you get hurt. It's kind of like when my son started dating. I always said, boy, I'm going to be the coolest mother-in-law ever. Wrong. Also, I started getting afraid that, oh my God, what if this person is not loving, and what if they mistreat my son? So it's the same thing. And actually, when my kids started becoming adults, I really started understanding my parents' fears a lot more. So I was able then to see, often their fear of me being an embarrassment was also something else underneath it. So the first thing you want to start is by really listening deeply to what it is they're really afraid of. And often when you start understanding that, then you can open up a dialogue. And then it really comes down to talking and listening and talking and listening, and also then accepting if they still are going to be afraid or don't get it. I'm not a believer in forcing my opinion or my lifestyle on anybody. I just don't go for that. So what I would find also when my parents were resistant to certain things or when other loved ones were resistant, I just had to accept that, this is their jam. They're not going to get it. It's like politics too. We're not all going to agree on the same politics, but am I going to cut everybody off who believes differently than me? No, I'm going to find a way to understand where they're coming from. And I'm not going to try to proselytize or change their mind. I'm just going to state my opinion and let it be. That's all you can do. Not easy.
Yeah, no, it certainly is not. But I think it is really important that we do, when we're living a brave life, I think it's important that we do live this. The openness is not just a passive openness, but it works both ways, like you are open to being vulnerable with other people, but you also have to be open enough to allow them to come into you as well. And I think that that's part of listening to their fears and trying to understand them.
I'm also remarkably tolerant of intolerant people. I'm really, really tolerant of that. That sounds really crazy. But I've got people in my life who sometimes say things that really are outside of my thing or the way I view the world. And I view the world very differently. I view it with a lot of openness and et cetera, but not everybody in my life does. And I know people who will cut somebody off if they really have a viewpoint that is opposing or feels threatening or feels negative. I'm not like that. I'm curious. I want to know why, and I want to see the good within you, even if I don't like the way you think. Because I believe ultimately all of us have good in us. And even again, when people don't support us, sometimes there's a real goodness behind that. It's not always necessarily what we think it is. One of the things that's really given me perspective with a lot of this stuff about doing your own thing also and supporting and getting support is having children of my own and really watching them go off. They're both adults now and do their own thing. Again, my son dating was a big eye-opener for me. But even watching them develop their lives and go off and do the things they're going to do, boy, I had to practice what I preach. It's interesting. Very interesting.
What's that like, having the tables turned like that?
Scary, because again, all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, what if my child gets hurt? What if? That what if, that's a dangerous question. But because of my life experience and having so much, flack with it, I'm probably a more open-minded parent than most, but I still have my fears like any other parent. So I've had to learn to really check myself before I wreck myself and before I wreck things with them. And I've had to learn to be, here's one thing kids teach you a lot. They teach you to be accepting. They really do. And if you can get down with accepting who they are and their choices, even if you don't always like them, it's quite an interesting experience. And then it all comes back then to you working on your own stuff. So I think children are a remarkable mirror for the work that we need to do. So they taught me a lot.
Man, parents have a hard job.
Yes, it's not a job for talk about brave. I think having a kid, now that I look at it with so much more perspective, again, my children, I have a 32-year-old and a 30-year-old. So I had my children when I was very young, 19 and 20, for the first, both my children before the age of 25. Think about that. Boy, was that crazy. And I look at it now and I'm like, what was I thinking? And it was the best decision I ever made. But having your children, you've got to be one brave person. You are coming up against so many things in the outer world, first of all. And then you've got these individuals with their own minds, and you cannot mold your child to your own graven image. You've got to let them be themselves. And I just think that was just an experience. And even to this day now, the navigating the adult relationships are fascinating, because the biggest lesson for the parent of an adult child is to shut your mouth. And the biggest lesson for a child who's an adult with older parents is to learn how to listen more. So it's all about finding ways to understand each other. And I just think it's fascinating. I really am glad I had kids, but boy, everyone should think very carefully before you have a child, because it is a brave job. It is a hard job. It is not easy.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that. Just in witnessing other people, I don't have my own kids, but in witnessing it as a child, and then also as a sister, who as an aunt and a friend. And I think it's a really challenging role.
Yeah.
So before we close up shop here for this episode or this conversation, let's talk a little bit more about tarot. So we had Ciolo Thompson, who is an artist, on the show. I think hers episode was episode number 2, for anybody wondering. She did a gorgeous illustrated tarot deck. It is just gorgeous. Watercolors and sketches. It's beautiful. And she has a really great way to describe tarot. In my opinion, I think it's great, where she describes tarot as a framework for viewing your life from new, different angles. Mm-hmm. And some people read them as literal translations or literal predictions, whereas others will read the cards as like a, hey, did you think about this angle of this decision that you're about ready to make? What do you have to offer new, curious tarot readers?
Well, I like to say that tarot is like a roadmap. That's what I like to view it as. And what it does is it shows where you are headed from this point in time and what various things you may encounter along the path. I'm a huge believer in free will. Even though I think there are some things that can be fated, I'm a believer that our life is created by our choices. Life doesn't just happen to you. I mean, it's not passive at all. So when you get a reading, it gives you an opportunity to really explore where you've been, where you are, and where you might be headed. And if you don't like the way it's looking, there is always a way to take a detour. There's always an escape chute. But if it's also showing, hey, this is all green light, then you know that you can proceed and trust in the universe and trust in your decisions. So that's how I tend to view it. I don't like to think of life as just this horrible fated thing for the day you're born and that's it, and this is what you end up with and you're totally screwed. I think people who view their life from that standpoint, they're really making themselves powerless. And we are powerful. Any day, your choices can determine where you're going to end up. I could right now get off this phone with you and decide that, today I'm going to not work at all. I'm going to blow all my clients off and I'm going to go and do something really destructive. I can decide to do that. I won't, but I can. Or I can decide I'm going to show up, nail it. I'm going to take very good care of people. We always have choices every single day. Another analogy that I like to use is driving. When we talk about roadmaps. Have you ever had it where you're driving and all of a sudden you see a car coming the other way and they blink a light at you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know what that means. It means, hey, there's a cop up ahead. You better slow down. There's a speed trap. Or it means turn on your lights. One or the other. And if my lights aren't turned on, then I know, okay, there's something up ahead. Now I have a choice. I can speed on along or even speed up and take a risk. Or I can look at that little warning and say, maybe I need to slow down a little bit. And right there, I can change what may be happening. So that's, again, how I like to look at life. And I like to look at tarot as that. Tarot is like those lights. They blink. They show you what's coming. Blink, blink, warn. And then, again, it's still up to you to decide where you want to go, how you want to do things. And how do you want to show up in your life?
And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about tarot or someone's advice or someone scoffing at you.
Yes.
And quite honestly, like if someone is scoffing or doubting your success, they have a reason for that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it isn't worth ignoring.
Sometimes not.
Sometimes it's okay to go, why is everyone thinking that I'm going to fail?
Yes.
Maybe they see something that I don't. And, of course, at some point you have to choose to ignore or listen to those things, like you were saying, choose to pay attention to the blinking light or not, or barrel on ahead regardless.
Yeah.
It's just really great to take a moment and listen to the warning signs that are all around you, or not warning signs, but the
signs, the omens, whatever you want to call it. But even you have to listen to your own gut. And that is about being extremely present. You have to be extremely present to listen to your gut. And I think yoga is very helpful for that. I know when something isn't right for me. I know it. And I'm one of those people that, for example, I certainly like good-looking men. And sometimes, back in the day, I've been partnered for a very long time now. But back in the day, of course, I might see somebody and think, oh, he's really cute, but I get a bad feeling about it. Well, when I was young and stupid, I would ignore that bad feeling, and ta-da, I'd learned some lessons. Now, after a couple lessons, I learned to really listen. And I've got a very wonderful dramatic story about this. Years ago, I met somebody who technically was my type, and I have a very certain type. I'm very specific. And he was cute, groovy musician, long hair, all the things I love. And something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. By this time, I had known that I need to listen to that. And so, as cute as he was, I said, no, I'm sorry. You and I are just going to be friends. And later, he ended up murdering somebody in the most heinous way possible.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, no. No, it was actually a very famous case, too. So long story short, I look back at that time and how I remembered tuning into that vibe and feeling it. And I knew something's wrong with this guy. And I didn't ignore it. Didn't matter how cute he was. I didn't ignore it. So it's the same with tarot. It's the same with life. It's the same with when you're getting flack. Now, if I was maybe getting some other kind of vibe there, who knows what might have happened. But all I know is I paid attention. And so you've got to be present and pay attention. And you'll know if something's good or bad, or if you're on the wrong track or the right track, and you can adjust accordingly.
Yeah, that's great. It's really fantastic advice. Okay, so what are you excited about moving forward? I know you have some exciting news.
I have a book coming out on November 1st on Sounds True Publishing. They are the most fabulous publishing company. I've been so honored to work with them. The book is called The Tarot Coloring Book, and it is a tarot book for total beginners. Although, interestingly enough, some of my friends who are more advanced tarot readers have actually been getting something out of it too. But it's designed to really create an experiential way to learn tarot. I love to say, back in the day, when I was learning, there weren't a whole lot of books. And so, once again, I had no mentors, no teachers, very little to go from. I had to learn the hard way. And the Tarot Coloring Book is designed to really help experiential learners really get to absorb the tarot. And you do that, you're coloring in the images, you're reading the instructions, you're really creating an intimate connection with it. And so that is the whole theory behind it. And it's fun. It's written in jargon-free lingo. So I made it so anybody could understand it. And it's also a little bit playful, which I tend to be more of a playful person. So that is the book that's coming out. It's November 1st. It's gorgeous, it's fun, and I think people are really going to enjoy working with it. And hopefully, my theory is, I'm going to inspire more people to pick up a deck and see how it can help them, really as a tool for guidance as they go about their life.
That's fantastic. Did you do the designs in the coloring book?
No, we're working with the traditional Rider-Waite deck I mentioned earlier.
Oh, fantastic.
So yeah, the traditional Rider-Waite there is in there. And the Rider-Waite deck is the one that, like I said earlier, really connected with me. And it's the deck that most modern tarot decks are based on. So once you get that Rider-Waite tarot down, you know what? You can work with any deck then. Any deck.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't wait to get my hands on it. It'll be fun to noodle around on and glean some new things from it. So this has been great. Thank you so much, Theresa, for joining us. I am really grateful that you came and offered some of your wisdom and your stick it to the man, fist in the sky punk rockness. I really admire that. As a punk rocker myself, I'm bowing down to you. I think it's really fantastic that you are able to bring that kind of bravery throughout your life. So I appreciate that. We need more people who do that.
Thank you very much. And I am very honored to be here. And this was such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. What a great batch of wisdom. And regardless of what you think about tarot and tarot cards and astrology and all the mystical stuff that is out there, the advice is solid. It's important to heed those warning signs that we see around us, be they from our friends and family or from a religious set of ideals, or even just the weather report. Sometimes we actually do need to take an umbrella with us to work. And so, or wear galoshes on a certain day. It makes things a little bit easier if we can see those warning signs and be open enough to hear them, yet still have the fortitude to push on and do the things that we want to and set out to do. If you loved what we talked about today, then you'll probably love Theresa Reed's website and everything she's all about. All her Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and her personal website, those links are all on the show notes for today. And you can just go to barenakedbravery.com and you'll get forwarded to the episode for today. I'm really excited for Theresa's new coloring book, the Tarot Coloring Book. And you can also, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. If you're digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, go ahead and visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. If you're curious about how you can help and support the show and spread the bravery even further, in the show notes at the bottom of every episode, we've got a list of awesome ways that you can help out. Most of them are free. You don't even need to do anything but spend a couple minutes leaving a review. In fact, speaking of reviews, here's one left in iTunes by Amy Schuber from the US. She says, Emily Ann is sharing beautifully in this podcast. Her curiosity is brilliant, and I love how vulnerability shines the light on how we can all be brave. Inspiring. I love Emily's energy too. Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate all of that. If you want to leave a review in iTunes or in your podcast app, go for it. I give you the full green light to go ahead and go forth on that. It really does help out the show when we can spread the news about it with our friends and family and coworkers too. So if you have listened to an episode and it has meant a lot to you, that means it's probably going to mean a lot to somebody else that you know as well. So go ahead and share it. You don't have to leave an iTunes review if you can't figure that out. Some people can't. Sometimes it's tricky. Technology is weird. But you can just simply send an email, tell people to go listen to the show, send a tweet, share it on Facebook. It really does help out a lot. I am looking forward to being with you next week because we have a really great conversation in store for you. You're going to love it. And until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.